entitled Process of Innovation Development and Technology Readiness Level and Commercialization of Lab Technologies and Tech Transfer, organized by Startup and Innovation Cell SKNCU. Technology Readiness Assessment is a systematic metric-based process that evaluates the maturity and the risk associated with critical technologies under development. It is commonly accepted approach used in a number of industries and government organized to assess the maturity of technology on an entire scale from its invention to commercialization and wide scale application. Now I feel privileged to introduce our today's speaker, Dr. Prajakta Kulkarni ma'am. Dr. Prajakta Kulkarni ma'am is the founder and CEO at SciKare Santa Barbara, USA. Dr. Prajakta Kulkarni has pursued her PhD in pharmaceutical science from the North Dakota State University, USA. She has experience of more than 15 years in the field of education and innovation. She has achieved 5 awards for research activities and 3 awards for innovation and entrepreneurship. She has 4 patents to her credit. She has also published more than 10 research articles. Her technical expertise are nanomedicines, biomaterials, biosensors, and device development. So with this, I request Dr. Prajakta Kulkarni ma'am to share some knowledge. Ma'am, please.
Thank you for the introduction, and it is a great pleasure to be here today. There was one important aspect that wasn't shared as I started my education in pharmacy with Sinhgad College of Pharmacy, Vadgaon. I started my academic career with Sinhgad College of Pharmacy, Vadgaon, and then I started my doctoral education in the United States. Then I did my postdoc with University of California, and that's where I have my 2 startups right now developing some innovative technologies. So, so I'm very pleased to be here because mainly I'm getting this opportunity to interact with some students from Sinhgad College of Pharmacy. So it's amazing. So today I'm going to talk about technology readiness from idea to commercialization. As it was introduced before, I'll talk about 2 major topics in the field of innovation, actually. So one is process of innovation development and technology readiness levels. And the second part would be like commercialization of lab developed technologies and tech transfer. So when we think about these 2 topics, they are very different, but at the same time, if you merge them together, you can achieve better results in taking an idea to the market. Now, when you're talking about taking an idea to the market, you must have heard that it is a hurdle race. And these hurdles present themselves in different forms. Sometimes it's product development, sometimes it's patenting related issues, sometimes it's regulatory process, sometimes it's market need or marketing related challenges. But it is a series of challenges, and if you think of them in a systematic manner, the entire journey becomes very rewarding. So before going into the details of what I'm going to talk about, the technology readiness levels, I will explain some basic terminologies and make sure that everyone is on the same page. So we talk about always innovation and invention. And sometimes people use those terms very interchangeably, but those are different terms, and we'll discuss that. Then we'll go to bench to bedside translational research. We'll see technology readiness and then the technology transfer aspect. So talking about invention versus innovation. So invention is something that has never been made before. But innovation is something that is new to the market. So it's one step ahead of innovation, but just making something better rather than inventing something. So these 2 are very different concepts, but they're oftentimes used interchangeably, but these are 2 different concepts. So when we are thinking about bench to bedside translation, if it's an invention, things are slightly different from if it's an innovation. And that's why I wanted to bring that to everyone's attention. So what is the bench to bedside translation? I know that you had many other talks before on this topic, and everyone likes to talk about this bench to bedside translation. But I will just touch this basic concept and move ahead. So the process by which the results of research done in the laboratory are directly used to develop new ways to treat patients. So in simple terms, for a bench to bedside process, we do some basic research. From this basic research, there are some invention and innovations come into picture, right? And then we do some preclinical validation with them. So as in we do some animal models to test out our innovations. And then it goes for the clinical validation, where there's clinical trials are going on, and then regulatory approvals and market entry. So in simple terms, there are only 3 steps. One is preclinical development, then clinical validation, and FDA approvals and commercialization, right? Looks very simple, but let's look at the cost of the entire drug development process. The recent report says that it's in millions and millions of dollars and takes more than 10 years, and which has never changed for many decades. So where does academia and startup come into picture? This seems like an activity for a large-scale industry. So where do academia and startups come into picture in this entire scenario? And the answer would be the innovations or inventions that originate from academia. And so academic research, industrial research, or from industry-academia collaborations, there are many inventions and innovations come to the picture. But what happens after that? So the path and challenges in commercialization are very unique to each innovation. So the path that an academic person would take would not be same as the path that industry innovation travels. So the paths are different, but if we take the systematic approach, the journey becomes easier. And so I'm going to talk about that systematic approach today. And a systematic approach is the technology readiness level. So how ready your technology is for commercialization. So technology readiness levels are a type of measurement system used to assess the maturity level of a particular technology. So it's usually used for high-risk technologies where the projects are big. So for example, for biomedical industry, where the timelines are huge and expenses are huge. So we don't want to make any mistakes in bringing the product to the market. Of course, the mistakes happen, but still we don't want to make any mistakes in the process. And so it's very important to keep a keen eye on technology readiness levels when you're developing a new technology for market. So technology readiness levels are used to assess the maturity of new technology towards full economic operation. So is it ready for the market? It starts with the early concept and goes to an application of a technology in its final form. There are 9 different levels, and there is a scale which is called like technology readiness level, obviously. So there are 9 levels. So it's TRL1, TRL2, TRL3, and it goes to TRL9. And during this talk, I will be referring to these levels as TRLs. The timeline for each TRL depends on the technology, and it's extremely variable for every technology. But the approach is the same. So we'll quickly go through what happens at each TRL and at each level, and then we'll look at a simple example which will help us understand what really happens. So TRL1 is where only the basic principles are observed or reported. So this is where the research really starts. And a very important phenomenon is observed in basic research. It sometimes ends with a research article published in a paper, but not in applied research, but more like basic research. TRL 2 is where the technology concept or application is formulated. And this is where really the invention begins. So this is where the applications are speculated. So there are no applications yet. It's just speculated, oh, this molecule can be used for this particular purpose. That's it. TRL 3 is where the active research and development takes place. And this is where we have to prove that, okay, this critical function that was speculated in TRL 1 is actually, this is what is going to happen. TRL 4 is where the product or process validation is conducted in laboratory environment. So basic technological components are integrated to establish that they work together. So maybe a simple formulation that is made in a laboratory environment. TRL 5 is where the product or process validation is done in relevant environment. So basic technological components are integrated with realistic, reasonably realistic, not very realistic, but reasonably realistic elements to test in simulated environment. So still the environment is simulated. So it's a lab environment, but it's still a simulated environment. When we go to TRL 6, the product or process prototype demonstration takes place in relevant environment. So now it's more like operational environment, still not an operational environment, but more like an operational environment. Then TRL 7 is where the prototype is demonstrated in an operational environment. And in TRL 8, the actual product and process is completed and qualified through test and demonstration. And now it is ready for market. So the product is actually, in TRL 9, the product is actually in the market. Now let's take a simple example. So 2020 has taught us a lot about a face mask, right? So I'm sure every one of us has received some video or some forward in which they tell us how to make a mask. And I'm sure, so I thought this example would be very simple and for everyone to understand how to take a face mask to commercialization. So now in the TRL level 1, a fabric with specific properties was discovered. So, okay, this fabric is good, that's it. So the basic principle was observed and reported. So this fabric can transfer, is comfortable for use in humans or something like that. And then the fabric has desirable properties for developing a 3-ply mask. A very simple thing. So the technology concept or application is formulated. In the TRL 1, you just found a fabric. In TRL 2, you can make a 3-ply mask with it, which is TRL 2. Then in TRL 3, the actual research and development takes place that do we really want a 3-ply mask? Or is it going to be comfortable wearing this 3-ply mask? How much is the permeability? What is the comfort level? What is it going to cover mouth and nose and everything? So critical function or characteristics for a proof of concept will be evaluated in TRL 3. In TRL 4, we'll make a prototype. Let's see how it looks, how it feels, and maybe in TRL 5, we can test it out on some family or friends. And that's how we can evaluate if the technology is ready for commercialization. In TRL 6, let's try out in the relevant environment. Let's take this mask, make these people wear this mask, and let's take them outdoors and see how they find the comfort level with the mask. And then you distribute it to your friends and see if it's operational in operational environment. So this is a very simplest possible example for a technology like taking a technology from idea to the market. So now in TRL 8, you make the product which looks like a final product and it's not a prototype anymore, has the desired characteristics, is validated with your friends and family and small group of people, and then it's ready for market. And then in TRL 9, it goes to the market. So looks very simple when you explain it with the mask example, but is it that simple? So broad interpretation of TRL levels is the first 3 levels are more like research levels. So a new technology is introduced and research is conducted to make sure that it is viable idea. And once it is observed that this is a viable idea, then the development process starts in TRL 4 through TRL 7. Once we reach the TRL 7, we have observed that it can the product can work in the operational environment, and then it's just a part of deployment. So as in it is ready for commercialization. So these levels are applied in biomedical sector for, of course, as it was said before, in therapeutics, in medical devices, and also for development of digital health platforms. Now we saw how the TRL levels for product development. Process development, I'm not going to go through it in very much details, but it can be used for product as well as for the process. But the basic idea remains the same. So earlier stages are for research. Then it is the translation or development phase comes into picture, and then it goes for commercialization. So as our textbook says, after the basic research, we go for preclinical research, then late preclinical research, which means toxicological studies or ADME studies. Then we go for phase 1 trials, phase 2 trials, phase 3 trials, and phase 4 trials. So everything seems very simple and very well laid out. So it has been the same for many decades that every textbook has given us this path. Then why do many technologies fail? How many biomedical innovations really make it to market? And the answer is very few. And the reason behind that is there is a huge gap. So as we discussed before, so the earlier stages are research stages, and most of the times these stages are funded through government and universities. So you can see here on x-axis there is technology readiness level, and on y-axis there's investment. So earlier stages are mostly funded in government by the government agencies and universities. And later stages are often funded through private sector because that's a commercialization phase. And this is where we know the technology works, there's market, and then the investments come in. But there is a huge gap between between TRL 4 through TRL 7. And the reason behind that is mainly because this is the section where the technology is not a product. Technology is not tested in the operational environment. And that is why there are high chances that an innovation or invention originates in academia, but ends with a publication, and nothing happens after that. So it's very important when we come from academic research institutes, it's very important to understand the landscape. So multiple innovations are on the path of commercialization today, but a very few are going to make it to market. Less than 30% of the startups survive after 5 years. And what is the reason behind this? So there's a concept called valley of death. I'm not sure if it is discussed before, but I'll go through it in detail. So there are two valleys of death in the path of commercialization. the first one occurs very quickly, as I said. So there's basic research done, but there is lack of funding. There are poor incentives for taking something to market, and we don't have any collaborator for translating this lab-developed technology. There are too many regulatory complications, and we don't want to deal with them because we don't have right resources to deal with them. And so that is called usually the value of death 1. And this is where most of the innovations really do not get commercialized. But let's say we cross this valley and go for clinical research and development. So we cross this valley, go for clinical research and development, and then all we need to do is, so okay, we have a product, it's safe, it works, it has right kind of efficacy, right kind of safety, and FDA is happy with us. Perfect. But then what happens is now there is the second valley of death here, and which is between the clinical research and healthcare implementation. And this is where, and this basically happens because of not knowing enough about market. So initially, when an academician does the research, we don't really know how the market is going to respond to it. Our information about the market is based on research articles, and we don't really know what's going to happen at that stage when the product is actually in the market. Who is going to pay for the product? Where this money is going to come from? How relevant our product is for today's need? And there are many other questions in other developed countries where there is insurance in the picture. So coming back to our TRL and the development phase. So if you see here the cash flow on y-axis and the TRL levels and time on the x-axis. So as I said, the fundamental research is always usually funded by government funding or university funding. And this research goes up to TRL level 3 or 4. After that, because the product is not validated, we cannot raise enough funds to bring it to the market. And this is where we need a lot of funding for clinical trials for phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and for phase 3. And so this is a very difficult region to bridge. For product development and legislation, so once you confirm that, okay, the product works in the clinical environment, then it becomes easier to get more funding. But then as you go ahead and realize that, oh, there is no market, or there's the market is not as big as we thought, or something like that, or at that point, the cash flow goes down again. And also those are the expensive processes involved at later stages of TRL. And so the product and market, if they are not validated, it becomes a problem to raise funds. But if you can cross the value of debt 2, then there are high chances that the cash flow goes in again. And that's when you can say that, okay, the idea is actually translated for the market. Now, as we are talking about these values of debt for any startup or for any technology or for any commercialization pathway, who would take this risk? Because there's such a high risk. Who wants to take this risk? What is the risk to benefit ratio for anyone? And who could cross this value of debt? So usually it is thought that role of university researcher is to invent a technology. Role of technology transfer professional is to see commercial feasibility and feasibility of the technology. And then role of entrepreneurs is to validate the business plan and get to the startup. But interestingly, there is a huge gap in knowledge. So university researcher, when is interacting with an entrepreneur, would not know, cannot speak each other's languages. And so it's very important for both to understand what each other is speaking and mainly focus on the progression of the technology development. So in this scenario, many key players come into picture. Of course, the academic institutions are key players in innovation, and they have technology transfer offices. Also, industries are very helpful in getting this some interesting innovations that originated from academia to the market. Government agencies are really helpful, and all over the world they are helpful. And private funding organizations, so they can also help in this process. So as I said, the academic research helps in basic research and applied research and in TRL 1 through 3. What happens in the tech transfer department? So once the invention or innovation comes from the academic lab, it is evaluated at tech transfer department. And the tech transfer office understands the technology and also can evaluate your technology if it for the intellectual property. And then they decide the IP strategy for your technology. They manage the patent portfolio, and they also market the patent portfolio. So marketing of IP is like, so they will email multiple industries and multiple people in the industry and try to market what they have at the university. And if an industry is interested into this IP, then they contact the university and the technology is licensed out. But many university researchers don't realize when should they contact the tech transfer office. And many technologies which could be patented are published and are perished for the IP protection purposes. So when I would say, if you realize that you have an invention or you have something unique, contact the tech transfer office as early as possible. I would say before or as soon as the proof of concept is observed. That is before the TRL level 4. Then evaluate your technology. Like before going for the meeting with tech transfer office, evaluate your technology for novelty and inventive step. Make sure that you have something novel, you have an inventive step in your technology. Do some preliminary prior art search. So prior art search is search means that look for what others have developed on your technology or what is similar to your technology, and do some prior art search. Enlist the distinguishing characteristics of your technology and then go for the provisional patent application. And then keep working on your idea even further to develop the proof of concept and then file the utility patent. So the reason for mentioning these steps is most of the times we don't even realize that we had something awesome that could have been patented and we just didn't realize it early on. So make sure if you're working on a research project, make sure you do some preliminary prior art search. Make sure you have some distinguishing characteristics in your technology. And if you think that it is an inventive step, make sure to contact your technology transfer. What happens at technology transfer is transfer office, and I'm specifically mentioning to contact technology transfer office because they act as bridge between industry and academia, and it could be a very meaningful or useful resource to know. So once you have your IP protected, so that is the patent, it's disclosed and evaluated, then So when you have an intellectual property, first do the disclosure. Disclosure as in just tell the technology transfer office that this is what we have right now. So they will evaluate it further. Then it's protected by IP, so by provisional patent application. And then the technology transfer office can go for marketing and establish some business partnerships for you for commercialization. So in this complete process of idea to commercialization, industries play a very important role as well. So industries help academia with collaborations, as I mentioned. They also license out innovations from academic institutions. They help with lead stage clinical validation. They also need to, so it's very important to know that this can actually happen, and knowing how to make it happen is an interesting thing to know. If you have a startup, they also help with mergers and acquisitions. Themselves, industry itself can run the entire innovation from TRL 1 to 9, as they have private, public, and government funding. But when we are dealing with innovations from academia, it's very important to focus on the first two aspects of industry collaborations. So they also play a very vital role in crossing the valley of death. Industry has a lot of funding, and academic institutions are struggling for funding most of the times. And if there is a collaboration, most of the technologies developed in academia can be immediately translated for industrial use. But it's very important to have this crosstalk between the clinical world, academic world, and business world. And I think it's very difficult to make it happen when you're a student or when you're working on your own project. But it's extremely important to have that crosstalk between clinician, academician, and an entrepreneur. And that helps you bring or bridge the gap between the valleys. Another interesting approach to take is the startups. And as I said, that bringing a technology to market is going to require a huge amount of funding, huge amount of time. But where do the startups come into picture? Startups have very unique position in this entire scenario. They have flexible structure. They can take bootstrapping approach. They have smaller teams. They have low funding requirements. And so they can do a fast-paced development. They don't have strict policies on what they do. So in academia, focuses more on academics. In industry, focuses more on commercialization. But in startup, they can collaborate with academia, industry, and clinicians very in a flexible way, and can effectively cross the valleys of death. And so startups are a very interesting way to think about taking the technology to market. But of course, they are very useful for crossing the valleys. And as you can imagine, the act is more like the rope walking act, because you exactly know what you're doing. So you're basically walking the valley of death, and you have to make sure that you see the other end of the translational process. So here are some suggestions for translating, or if you want to do the rope walk, these are suggestions for all the students actually. So first of all, identify the opportunity, and usually that happens very quickly. Then develop the required skills. You need to know if you're a student. So for example, in my case, I had a PhD in pharmaceutical sciences, and I needed to learn some engineering aspects. So I had to do a postdoc in electrical engineering and mechanical engineering and something like that. But I was focused on like drug delivery projects at the same time. So anyways, so what I wanted to bring to your attention is develop the required skills. And it's not just related to technology, but more like what happens in the market. Try to understand market very well, because you can create a technology. If you're not smart enough, you can hire someone to develop the technology. If you understand science well enough, you can hire someone to raise funds. It's like there are different things you could do, but you cannot create a market. There has to be market for your technology. So make sure that you understand the market, you understand the market needs. Then conduct the field studies when technology is in TRL2 and TRL3 level. So most of the times what happens is when we go for market studies, we refer to what is there out in the literature. Oh, this looks like this research paper says there is a high need for developing this particular product. Not necessarily. So this is a research paper. So go in the field, ask clinicians if that is really what is needed. Or if you're developing a process for industry, go to industry and ask them if this is what they need. And it's very important to conduct a field study when technology is in TRL2 and TRL3 levels. Of course, collaborate with academia, industry, and clinicians early on so that we exactly know what we are doing. And as I said, like every academia, industry, and industry are key players into this translational process. If they collaborate early on, then we can successfully translate some technologies in future. Industry partnerships should actually happen at as early as TRL4, but this is an ideal scenario. Most of the times we see it in the later stages. If you decide to take it by yourself and go take a route of startups, then develop a product development plan, business development plan, and regulatory plan, which is a very important one. Also, execute on the plan, but don't stick to a plan very closely. Adapt to the plan as it evolves. And most importantly, work with people who have already walked the road in the past. Because process of translation is I wouldn't say it's difficult, but it's like a hurdle race. And if someone knows exactly how to overcome these hurdles, the path becomes very easy and more enjoyable than otherwise. So key takeaways from today's talks: innovations may originate in different environments. A systemic approach to commercialization can reduce the risk of failures. Technology transfer offices at universities could help in commercialization of lab-developed technologies. Technology readiness levels help in understanding the maturity level and level of the technology, but make sure that you engage into some partnerships with academia, industry, and clinical partnerships at earlier TRL stage, so the translation process has higher rate of success. So with this, thank you for giving me this opportunity to interact with students, and I would be happy to answer any questions if anyone has. And you can reach me after the talk if you want. If you have any more questions, you can reach me at prajakta@SciKare.com. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your valuable information. It will definitely help us in the future. The session is available for question and answer now. If anybody has any doubt, you can raise your hand or you can type in the chat box.
Darshana, you can unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yes, ma'am. Good morning, ma'am. Myself Darshana, and I am from second year. Actually, ma'am, I want to ask that being a student, our faculty members helps us in every mode. But if we have any idea, so except faculty, where should we approach for the same?
So was your question related to research or was your question related to translation? Um, so you're
Yes.
Darshana? So
If we
you're a
have,
second year student, right? And
yes,
are you involved in research?
uh, not in research, but we are working on our one innovative idea. So that's
Okay,
why.
okay. So I'm sure your teachers can guide you in contacting the right people. I would say always contact someone who has done this before. So I'm sure you have. Uh, so if you have some contacts in industry, contact them. You can, if you know someone who is working on a similar idea, contact them. Internet is so amazing these days that you can reach anyone, anywhere in the world. So I'm sure you can find some mentors. Make sure you have some mentors. It's easier that way. And if you have any questions, you can reach me. So you already have my email address.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Do we have any queries or questions? If not, we can go ahead. We have someone. Abhay, you can unmute yourself and ask your question.
Good morning, ma'am. Myself
Good
Abhay,
morning.
first year. My question is, during your struggling time, what kind of obstacles or problems did you face, and how to overcome it?
In the path of commercialization, you mean?
Any during B pharmacy or postdoc?
Oh, interesting. Uh, wow. So there are so many occasions where everyone has to struggle. But uh, I would say the only way to overcome any problem is having good people around you. If you have good people around you, things become much easier. There is always a struggle from at every stage in your career, and sometimes things go the way you want, sometimes they don't. It's okay, because it's okay if they don't go your way today, they will go your way tomorrow. But always have someone around you, so some good friends um, who could help you in uh, overcoming these things. So it's usually, I think it's more like a personal thing. So some people don't like discussing their problems. Some people like discussing their problems, but if you can discuss your problems, it's nice to have people around. If uh, if if you don't want to discuss the problems, it's easier to just focus on your work and get your work done. So it's at least that's what I have done so far. So there, I don't I it would be too long of a list of challenges that you have to overcome to reach a certain stage. but there are many. That things happen. Just be focused.
Thank you, ma'am.
Just be focused.
Alfia, unmute yourself and ask your question.
If we started the startup and as we take funds and all, if things go wrong, what are the backup plans?
Yeah, the first plan is not to make sure that things don't go wrong. That's one. Usually, if the plan is well laid out, things don't go bad. But if you have good education, so for example, like in my case, I already have PhD, right? So the backup plan is already taken care of. So if you are a student, like first year or second year student, I would definitely encourage you to complete your education first, and then get into entrepreneurial activities. Mainly, of course, education is your backup plan, that's for sure. But also, it gives you a little bit of maturity of looking at a problem from a different angle. So a little bit of maturity, especially in the biomedical field, you do need to understand intricacies in developing regulatory plans and developing like products for use in humans. And for that, you need to have more education and more maturity to handle some difficult or handle some, not I wouldn't say difficult, but handle some challenges in the path. So I would definitely encourage everyone to complete their education before. There are success stories who dropped out of college and started their companies, but they are very few. Most of the people start their journey of entrepreneurship after they have some knowledge in the field. And it's very important to know what you're doing. I hope that answers your question.
Ronak?
Good evening. Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Good evening, ma'am. I'm Ronak Makwana from third year B Farm. And ma'am, my question was, ma'am, according to you, where should we pursue our masters? Is it better to pursue our masters in India, or is it better to pursue our masters in foreign countries? And even if we pursue our masters in foreign countries, can you tell us few steps which we should take or the initiatives for it?
So it's an interesting question. It's again very personal. It depends on what you want to do. So career-wise, I would suggest. So I did my master's in India. And I enjoyed it mainly because there was a research project. I liked the research project. I learned a lot during my master's too, and I enjoyed my master's in India. But I came here for my PhD. So it depends on what you want to do, and is the master's program or does the master's program offer you what you want to learn? So, for example, if you want to learn pharmacognosy and there is no pharmacognosy program in a certain university, then it wouldn't make any sense to go for that product just because it's in a particular university. So you should like the coursework, you should like the university and the entire environment. So if you want to decide to, if you decide to go abroad for your master's, the first step, of course, would be GRE, and I think everyone knows that. when you come for third year or final year, everyone starts working towards their GRE and IELTS. I would suggest, like, if you are taking that route, then contact some professors with whom you would like to work. So for example, I'm not very aware of how things happen for UK or Australia, but for the US, I would strongly suggest to contact certain professors, go through their work, see what they are doing, what they're working on, and go through their publications, see the recent publications, what they have published recently, and do you like that work? It's very important to like what you do. If you don't like it, if you don't enjoy it, it's very frustrating. So you have to like it, and that's going to be the thing you would be doing for entire of your life, because once you go into that stream, that's what you're going to do. Not necessarily like for me, I have hopped around, but still, like, you have to love what you do. So you have to make sure that you're going to a right kind of program. There is the professor is the right kind of a person you want to work with. Sometimes those programs are master's and PhD. If you get into that kind of program, I would strongly advise you to do that. So you can always decide not to continue with the PhD, but go for that kind of program, which is a 5-year program. And most of the times those are funded programs. So you would get funding for studying and also for research, obviously. And I would suggest take that route if you are planning to study abroad. If you're planning to study in India, just do what you like, and you will find yourself in the right place.
Thank you, ma'am, for your guidance.
You're welcome.
I think we can go ahead with the program now. Punita?
Now I request Dr. S.T. Sawant sir to share some words. So please.
Good evening, Prajakta madam, and good morning to all students and faculty members from SCNCOP. Prajakta madam, India is now building its innovation and startup, strengthening this area through lot of very conscious strategic plans and its execution from the central government, universities, and the state governments. As a result, you must have seen there are a lot of startups have come up in recent times. In last 2 years, a lot many publications are being and patents are being filed. The patents number has increased very significantly, and many startups are being converted into very successful enterprises. And we institutes, academic institutes like affiliated college, where there's little research and more of teaching, are also gearing up for the innovations of tomorrow. And the kind of efforts that we are making, you are one of them as a part of these efforts. And thank you for sensitizing, mentoring, guiding our students, who I'm sure are going to be the innovators in years to come. And your contribution, your little effort, and our everyone's little efforts are going to make their career in the 21st century. So thank you so much for joining us and guiding our students. Thank you, Preeti Madam, for bringing Prajakta Madam to us. And we request you to be part of our these efforts in years to come. So I'm happy that many students have really asked some questions which are sometimes eye-opening, which are also futuristic, looking at how they would like to make their career, how they would like to see it 5 years, 10 years down the line, and that's very satisfying to a teacher like me. So thank you so much. I would also appeal students to be part of such kind of efforts in future too. And this is how you are going to build your career. So thanks once again, Prajakta Madam.
Thank you. It has been a pleasure. And thank you so much for inviting me. It's great to interact with students.
Thank you so much, sir, for your valuable words. Now I request all the participants to on your camera for group photo. Thank you, everyone. Dear participants, we have sent the feedback form for today's session in the chat box. All are requested to fill the feedback form. On behalf of Srimati Kashibai Navale College of Pharmacy, I extend a hearty vote of thanks to Founder President of STES, Professor M.N. Navale sir, Founder Secretary, Dr. Mrs. Sunanda Navale ma'am, Vice President Admin, Mr. Rohit Navale sir, Vice President HR, Mrs. Rachna Navale Ashtikar ma'am, and Vice President Professor S.N. Navale sir for their support. A special thanks to Honorable Speaker Dr. Prajakta Kulkarni ma'am for sharing her experience and sparing her valuable time for guiding us. I thank our Principal Sir Dr. S.D. Sawant sir for always supporting and guiding us. Special thanks to our Faculty Coordinator Dr. Vandana Nikam ma'am and Preeti Surya ma'am. I would also like to thank all the teaching and non-teaching staff for being a part of today's program. With this, I would like to end today's meeting. Thank you all.